Hello everyone, my name is Jing, and today I will be your unpaid prosecution lawyer. I'll be presenting the case of Pierce versus Clarksville, the loss of Freeman history. Now you're probably wondering, what am I exactly talking about? Why am I talking about Pierce? Who is this Pierce person? What is it exactly? Well, I will be presenting the case details in the future slides, and of course, I hope that after this presentation, you'll be able to understand what I'm exactly talking about and possibly gain something from this. So what is a Pierce Mansion? The Pierce Mansion, also named the Warlaw Mansion, is located on 6 Niles Road in Austin, Texas. It was built on a plantation land that was about 365 acres. In 1853, Alvin H. Cook received a commission from the state comptroller James Shaw, who originally wanted to commission this mansion for his wife. Of course, some personal things came up and construction got delayed, but it was eventually finished within 1853. Now, of course, this mansion, which was built within the Greek Revival style, event was eventually sold off to Elijah M. Pierce, the current Texas governor, after James Shaw lost his wife and his son due to an unfortunate accident. And of course, deciding that there was no point in living there anymore, sold the mansion to the governor and moved out. Where now Elijah M. Pierce and his family continued to live there for 4 generations. Much until much later, this mansion was given away to UT Austin, as well as the UT San Antonio system, and of course was also written down as a historical landmark until it was eventually given away again under private ownership. Now, who exactly is Elijah M. Pierce? Elijah M. Pierce is the 5th and 13th governor of Texas. For him, he was considered to be a unionist, but on the terms of state unification. So, in terms of slavery, he really couldn't say he was a unionist on slavery because he actually owned slaves on his plantation during and after the Civil War. However, for him, he did believe that Texas should not secede from the Union. After the Civil War, like many other slave owners, he also didn't want to let go of his slaves like willy-nilly after they gained their newly found rights. So as a compromise, he decided to give plantation lands to the now emancipated slaves in hopes that he could keep them nearby Austin and also help have them available should he need their assistance again. Okay, so before we continue, I basically also described the Regal style mansion, and of course this will also apply into the next section, which we were talking about Southern culture and hospitality. So, what do we understand about Southern culture and grandeur as well as its hospitality, as Southern culture and grandeur? Well, our current understanding of Southern culture is that it's a hospitable culture with an emphasis on with a major emphasis on food. Many people know full well that Texas is pretty much big on food culture, as well as being hospitable to new people, to new races, to new faces, basically. And of course, there was also an emphasis on Greek Revival style architecture. Now, Greek Revival style architecture was predominantly used in rich land-owning plantation owners. They oftentimes use this as to show a status of wealth, as a status of grandeur. And of course, many people, when they think about Southern grandeur, they often think about these Greek revival-styled architectural homes, which reminds them of the emphasis of the grandeur of the old times. Of course, this is the accepted history of our Southern culture and, of course, Texas history. But if you were to dig a little deeper, especially within the confines of Clarksville, you will understand that there are a few holes within the culture of southern states. Now, Clarksville, what is this place, basically? Clarksville is specifically West Austin's really only black neighborhood that still has existed since Emancipation era. It's a mostly pedestrian-friendly neighborhood that is predominantly black-owned. It's located within West Austin's historical district that is just south of the old Pierce Mansion and plantation lands. This was obviously a former freeman colony that existed within Austin since the Emancipation period and Southern Reconstruction period. Now let's go into the past of Clarksville. So during Clarksville's past, the founder of Clarksville was Charles Clark, a former emancipated slave that decided to buy this land from Confederate General Nathan G. Shelley and created this community within 1871. Now, during this time, the government was still under federal control after losing the Civil War, obviously, and because of that, they had to do some, you know, reconstruction methods and reconstruction periods in order to actually regain their status back into the Union. So obviously, within this hilly area, with a nearby stream, the community was able to create a school, a community store, as well as a church. Obviously, all of these were predominantly black owned and were only available for colored people only. However, during the early 20th century, of course, obviously, the Reconstruction period ended, and then Jim Crow laws and, of course, discrimination practices started to begin. It was during this time that Austin was also experiencing a population boom and an expansion boom. The city areas were pretty much becoming crammed, becoming really unfavorable for people to live in, especially the Ingle residents. So they decided that the best way to basically deal with all this mess was to move out to West Austin. And seeing that Clarksville, despite the fact that it was a hilly area, was becoming more and more favorable to the Anglo residents of Austin. So, obviously, the Austin city government, egged on by basically the residents, decided to make development plans that did not include Clarksville, which basically meant that Clarksville was set up for demolition. Well, of course, in order for them to do that, they had to force the residents out into East Austin, where a predominantly black neighborhood was set up within the confines thanks to Austin city government. So, during this process, they used aggressive tactics of forced relocation, by denying city services such as gas, water, and electricity. And it also did not allow any schools or parks to be built within that area. So that meant that the only black colored school had to be forced out. Of course, the citizens of Clarksville still managed to continue on to today. Now, of course, as the years went by, these aggressive tactics, especially the Moped 1 expansion, was eventually replaced with a double-edged sword tactic that made people realize that they were still not out of the woods yet. Gentrification, also known as the New Eraser. This double-edged sword of city development basically is where the city develops a core area of the city to become more favorable to newer residents, specifically most likely the Anglo residents. That means there's public transportation, there's better new housing, there's more stores, yada yada yada. Now, of course, what does this mean? For gentrification, this basically means that rent prices and property values go way up, way up. And that means for their former residents, they now have to be forced out of their old living areas because it's no longer affordable to live in that area. And of course, gentrification oftentimes causes erasure of black communities. So when Taoni, a development company, came in and basically provided their services, at first, people were acceptable, were accepting, but eventually realized that Taoni was practicing erasure of their community. And of course, this meant that they fought back vehemently in order to make sure that gentrification didn't completely erase Clarksville. Alright, so now the question is why do we should care about all this? Why should we care about any of this? Well, the most important thing about this is the erasure of minority history, as I talked about in the gentrification slide. By removing science history within history books and preventing people from learning about them, we essentially prevent people from learning about the past and also the lessons that we learned from that past. Those lessons that, help us proceed to a better society with more diversity and more inclusion. It makes it difficult for people who aren't aware of these problems to help defend these minority groups from what would be like very aggressive tactics. Gentrification, for example. If I didn't know about the history of Clarksville, I would not have seen that gentrification was a bad thing. And of course, in order to solve all these problems, people need to get together in order to be able to defend people. Which, of course, this is impossible when silenced history is not presented at all. This is also plays a part in political spectrum as well. Political powers can use silenced history to their advantage by making sure that the silenced history is not well known within the community or within their political party. They could sway the voters in a specific direction, some mostly at the times of unfortunate disadvantage to the minority groups, because these minority groups are not well understood within other communities. This meant that their problems, their woes, their issues that is coming from the grievances of the government, or they're not oftentimes not heard because the science history is non-existent in their eyes. No one's telling them what exactly this science history is about. Why is it important to these minority groups? And why should we care about them? Without all this, it makes the battles more and more difficult. So, in conclusion, I hope that this presentation makes you look a bit more forward into the science history during Clarksville, as well as other freeman colonies that existed within the southern states. Thank you.